depois eu volto.
Tá, obrigado. Declaro aberta a sessão. Sob a proteção de Deus, iniciamos os nossos trabalhos. A presente sessão remota de debates temáticos foi convocada nos termos do ato da Comissão Diretora número 8 de 2021, que regulamenta o funcionamento das sessões e reuniões remotas semipresenciais no Senado Federal e a utilização do sistema de deliberação remota, em atendimento ao requerimento número 1881 de 2021 do senador Jacques Wagner e outros senadores, aprovado no plenário do Senado da República. Esta presidência informa que os cidadãos podem participar dessa sessão remota de debates temáticos através do endereço www.senado.leg.br/e-cidadania. É esse serviço que propicia que as pessoas entrem aqui na audiência conosco ou também pelo telefone 0800 061 2211. Ademais, desde 2019, o portal E-Cidadania do Senado Federal, de forma inclusiva, passou a receber ideias legislativas de pessoas surdas por meio de vídeos em Libras. Para garantir o amplo entendimento da ferramenta por todos, foram criados vários vídeos em Libras com o passo a passo. Dessa forma, o portal possibilita a participação de praticamente todos os brasileiros interessados que podem sugerir suas ideias escrevendo pela internet, ligando pelo 0800 do Senado e agora também por meio do vídeo em Libras.
By video in Libras. The chair also informs that the presentations and files exhibited during this remote session of thematic discussion will be available at the Federal Senate's website related to the processing of the request that originated this session. The session is intended to host the following guests to discuss the results presented in the IPCC report and the impacts and recommendations for Brazil. His Excellency Governor Renato Casagrande, Governor of Espírito Santo, who is already here by my side. Thank you, Governor, for your availability. And also as coordinator of the Forum of Governors for Climate, which is the only of its nature in all the world with this set. Most Reverend Mr. Don Valmor Oliveira de Azevedo, Archbishop in the city of Belo Horizonte and President of the National Conference of Bishops. He is present remotely. Ms. Fiona Clowder, UK Ambassador to the United Nations Climate Change Conference 2021, COP 26, which will happen in United Kingdom. Sir David King, chemist, former chief scientific advisor to the British government and chair of the Climate Repair Center at the University of Cambridge. Ms. Greta Thunberg, Swedish environmental activist, and Ms. Samela Sateri-Mawe, environmental activist, biology student, presenter, and consultant. We invited to several people. We have invited someone, an authority, Renato Casagrande, civil society members, Mr. Valmor, environmental activists, and also Sir David King as our technical person so that we can mix and help this House to reflect on the issue of the climate. The chair informs that the following procedures will be adopted. Guests will have 10 minutes, which can be extended if necessary. Afterwards, Q&A phase will be opened by the listed senators organized in groups. Each senator will have 5 minutes for their questions. Guests will have 3 minutes to answer all the questions of the group. Senators will have 2 minutes for the reply. Senators' listing will be made through the remote system. Hands will be lowered on the remote system, and the listing process is now open. I am not going to give a speech because what matters to us is the speech of our guests. I just want, as chair of the Environmental Committee, to say that the climate issue is not only an issue, an ideological issue of left or right. Climate is a common sense issue. It's an issue of recognizing, based on scientific studies, of this sixth report of IPCC presented on August 9th. It is a siren, an alert, not for us to stop produce and developing, but for us to understand that we need to change the way we
colocar entre desenvolver, gerar emprego e preservar. Na verdade, eu acredito na chamada sustentabilidade tripartite: sustentabilidade econômica, social e ambiental. A degradação do meio ambiente, a degradação do mundo do trabalho e a degradação da economia. É preciso que, de forma inteligente, sustentados pelos vários estudos
It's important that we, in an intelligent way, inspired by the preservation of life, to understand that we need to have this attitude. I've tried to impose this approach in the committee, and I understand that this is the right approach. The IPCC study have shown that we are moving in a fast way to destroy the nature, the environment. And I'd like to take this opportunity to tell to my colleagues here, the senators, and all the audience through the Senate TV, that this is the time to take a stand on behalf of the defense of the nature and the environment. And it is clear for me that we have these zoonoses at this time, and I understand that this is a consequence, is the impact caused by our impact over the environment and on the planet. And since today is Friday, as a native of Bahia, the state of Brazil, I'm wearing a white shirt. I'd like to invite my fellow Baiana member, citizen of my state, Miss Margarete, to sing a song that is highly inspired. And during this Friday, and I see here Senator Espiridião Amin, who is not wearing white, and also our fellow Senator Zenaide Valmor. Ms. Zanetti, you have the floor. It's an honor to me. It's really an honor. This song is called Mudança.
Sentir o cheiro do mato da Imburana, descansar, morrer de sono na sombra da barriguda. De nada vale tanto esforço no meu canto, para nosso espanto tanta mata já vão matar. Tal mata atlântica e a próxima amazônica, arvoredos seculares, impossível replantar. Que triste sina teve cedro nosso primo, desde menino que eu nem gosto de falar. Depois de tanto sofrimento, seu destino virou tamborete, mesa, cadeira, balcão de bar. Quem por acaso ouviu falar da sucupira, parece até mentira que o jacarandá, antes de virar poltrona, porta-armário, morar no dicionário, vida eterna milenar. Quem hoje é vivo corre perigo, e os inimigos do verde da sombra o ar, que se respira, e a clorofila das matas virgens destruídas, bom lembrar que quando chegar a hora, é certo que não demora, não chame Nossa Senhora, só quem pode nos salvar é Cabiúna, Cerejeira, Paraúna, Imbuia, Pau d'Arco, Sova, Juazeiro, Jatobá, Gonçalo Alves, Paraíba, Itaúba, Loripê, Paracaúba, Peroba, Massaranduba, Carvalho, Mogno, Canela, Imbuzeiro, Catuaba, Janaúba, Aroeira, Araribá, Pau-Ferro, Angico, Amargoso, Gameleira, Andiroba, Copaíba, Pau-Brasil, Jequitibá, Cipó Caboclo tá subindo na virola, chegou a hora do pinheiro balançar, sentir o cheiro do mato da Imburana, descansar, morrer de sono na sombra da barriguda. De nada vale tanto esforço no meu canto, para nosso espanto tanta mata já vão matar. Então, Mata Atlântica e a próxima Amazônica, arvoredos seculares, impossível replantar. Que triste sina teve cedro, nosso primo, desde menino que eu nem gosto de falar. Depois de tanto sofrimento, seu destino virou tamborete, mesa, cadeira, balcão de bar. Quem hoje é vivo corre perigo, e os inimigos do verde da sombra ao ar, que se respira, e a clorofila das matas virgens destruídas, bom lembrar que quando chegar a hora, é certo que não demora, não chame Nossa Senhora, só quem pode nos salvar é Cabiúna, Cerejeira, Baraúna, Imbuia, Pau d'Arco, Sova, Juazeiro, Jatobá, Gonçalo Alves, Paraíba, Itaúba, Loripê, Paracaúba, Peroba, Massaranduba, Carvalho, Mogno, Canela, Imbuzeiro, Catuaba, Janaúba, Aroeira, Araribá, Pau-Ferro, Angico, Amargoso, Gameleira, Andiroba, Copaíba.
The lyrics of the song is about Brazilian trees, the names of several Brazilian trees that are under extinction and are being cut down. We need to save our Amazon. Our Amazon is under danger.
Obrigado, querida amiga Margarete Menezes.
Thank you, friend Margaret Menezes. In addition to your singing, she is an environmental activist. Thank you for bringing this song as a balm to all of us. I now invite our first guest, His Excellency Governor Renato Casagrande. It will have up to 15 minutes. Thank you. This is a great opportunity, and I will try to speak in 10 minutes as best as I can. I want to compliment all of you, all senators who are present, our friend Margaret, and all of you who are present, who have been invited and are participating in this debate regarding the report, the IPCC report. I am happy to be here. I wanted to come in person because I was chair of this committee when I was a senator, and I know of the importance of the work of this committee and especially of this debate today. Every week we discuss important themes related to sustainability. And what we have seen in this moment in Brazil and in the world are facts that are visible and reported on the IPCC report published last month. what has been consolidated in the studies that several scientists and human activity in the planet alters and makes the temperature increases and climate changes and all of these things we have seen today, and that has been affecting the planet and affecting both developing and underdeveloping countries. Climate changes reach the poor. The migrations we now see of populations that dislocate from one place to another, from a country and a region to another in search of water, running away from extreme climate events. This shows how difficult it is for those who are poorer to face the situation that is aggravated each year. The crisis reaches the poor. All crisis is worse for the poor. And this applies to the climate crisis. It is proven in the sixth report that says very objectively, humans are altering and making climate change advance in the world. And we have seen floodings in Europe and droughts in Africa. They're visible also in the warming of the Arctic, the heat waves in countries that are facing strong heat, the increase of the sea level, also the whitening of coral reefs, in the deaths that happen because of these extreme events. They are also visible in the influence on the economy, which is has been negatively impacted. This is not something for the future. It's something we are seeing now. The most grave thing that the report brings is that what we see today is going to get worse within the next years. Even if we are able to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases, methane, sulfur, CO2, even if we reduce these emissions, what has been triggered, the inertial force of this change, it will continue to happen. The efforts in the Paris COP, in which we believe we can now advance in Scotland. We stepped ahead to confirm those commitments as regards the responsibilities of each country, each citizen, each and entrepreneur. So our expectation is that we will change and we'll have different paths ahead. We must understand that we need to act. Our actions are anchored on international actions. We need to be part of the international articulation, the federal government, the National Congress, the governors, entrepreneurs, business owners, civil society. Brazil must be present in the international articulation. In this moment, when the Brazilian government gave a step back on this issue, someone has to give a step forward on this theme. That's why it's important to have the discussion on the Senate. The Senate must participate in the international articulations and also the governors. And I'm going to talk about our Green Brazil Consortium, Governors for the Climate. Brazil must be objectively inserted into the international debate. It is important, Senator Jacques Wagner and other senators, we need to discuss this topic here because it's going to be addressed in the November in the Conference of Parties, and we need to regulate the carbon market. Debate, talk about it, to really create the carbon market in Brazil in sync with the Conference of Parties will debate in November. We need to define the carbon market. We need to start projects so we can have internal and external resources. It's an important step for us to commit to at this moment. We need to reaffirm our goals, our contributions determined in 2015, which Brazil committed to in Paris, to reaffirm and recommit to these goals, because in 2015, in the November COP, we can further advance, but in 2015, November, Brazil had committed based on the 2005 emissions that we would reduce emissions in 37% until 2025 and 43% until 2030. And we would try to stop slash and burn in the Amazon until 2025. We're going to restore 12 million hectares of forest until 2030, and that our energy mix, renewable energy mix of over 30% without considering hydroelectric plants. So this recommitment is important for us to recommit to these goals. Next COP, it is fundamental to stop slash and burn, especially in the main biomes in Pantanal, Amazon, and the Cerrado. It is fundamental not only for the survival of the planet, it is fundamental so we can have a better economy, because bioeconomy today requires that we have this behavior, and to have an international stable market, we need to know that. We have had in 1 year a severe slash and burn in the Amazon, the worst of the last 10 years. It was higher than from 2019 to 2020. So the signs that Brazil is sending to the world regarding the preservation of a biome that is fundamental for climate stability is very bad. We need to advance in international partnerships. We need that. We need to understand that Brazil needs to be an example, a country like ours that has a sustainable energy mix that is also renewable, that has the forests that we have, and the nature and diversity that we have. We can have a much better image, both internally and externally. So we need to recommit to our goals. I understand that we must not only expect from the federal government, we must also meet our responsibility. Each institution has their responsibility to change culture and have and change consumption culture and change our attitudes so we can actually change our culture. We governors have this responsibility, as I demand the control of slash and burn in the Amazon. I can also require from my team to have responsibility on slash and burn in my state. the same way I demand from the federal government to incentivize renewable energy, I can also do that in my own state, as I can require and demand adaptation works to avoid several of the problems, environmental problems we have. I can have measures for works to dislocate people in risky areas. So the states and municipalities must contribute. We have decided to consolidate the Green Brazil Consortium, which is the coalition of governors for the climate. This is the first time that a continental country such as Brazil, that has this kind of governance, a governance that would include the governors of all states who want to participate, but a single consortium with a single fund, with a single theme, accompanied by an external organization to follow up on any on the projects that are executed under the financing of this fund. So this governance will cooperate for Brazil to achieve their goals. Brazil has to restore 12 million of hectares of forest until 2030. This requires the work of the federal government, but also the municipalities, the states, and the civil society. Brazil must be inserted into the international debate, and each of us must have a state level program for climate actions, and this commitment must be taken within the states and outside the states to bring in funds and to discuss new ideas. This will be an important role for us in Espírito Santo, my state. We have a program on climate change, and we have been implementing on several fronts. We have inaugurated a center of intelligence of civil defense to monitor weather forecasts and integrate all information so that we can send alerts on extreme events and make the civil defense work as best as they can. This is a theme that involves everybody. Business owners also have a role to play. WESG, social, environmental action, and business owners are becoming engaged in goals. And this is very important. So may the Senate be a driver to mobilize the interests of civil society so we can have this international debate, but also have our local actions. I'll stop here, very close to my time, and I am at your disposal. Thank you, Governor Casagrande. Congratulations for this initiative of the consortium and coalition of governors for the climate. If our federal government unfortunately ignores this issue, which is a step back since the budget of the environmental ministry and all the issues on slash and burn, our Brazilian community, mayors, deputies, governors, senators, business owners, institutions, we are all responsible for uniting to propose and press the government. This is the game of democracy. I am perplexed at what the government says on the environment, which is a world unanimity as how urgent the issue is, but we need to share this responsibility from the individual level to the highest instances. I now invite our second panel speaker, Ms. Fiona Clowder, Ambassador to the United Nations Climate Change Conference 2021.
Thank you so much, Senator Valverde, the invitation.
Your sound is now.
And to all members of the Senate for the opportunity to speak about.
Your microphone is not.
So I'm the regional ambassador for Latin America and Caribbean for COP26, the UN Climate Change Conference that will take place in Scotland from the 1st to the 12th of November. I'm also very honoured to speak alongside Sir David King, following expert speaking. I first worked with Sir David 20 years ago on science and innovation issues and had the opportunity to also visit Brazil and understand the enormous potential and the wonder of your country and the importance of environment issues. And that was 20 years ago. And now here we are debating the IPCC report and what is the world ahead of us. And my message today is one of urgency and of action that is needed to take forward, for action that is needed for Brazil, action that is needed for the world, and for our collective future, the future of everyone on this planet. And COP26 is a vital international milestone in taking that agenda forward. The IPCC report has made it clear climate change is happening. It is happening across the world. The impacts are devastating for people in countries all over the world and including in Brazil. Brazil has so much potential. It has the precious biodiversity of the Amazon and other ecosystems. It has the potential to have a huge influence on the world. And as Renato Casagrande said, we need Brazil to be present and to step forward. For COP26, the UK presidency designate has 4 clear goals. First of all, mitigation, to encourage all countries to come forward with ambitious NDCs, the nationally determined contributions that set the goals to reduce emissions targets by 2030. The COP President designate, Alok Sharma, encourages Brazil to come forward with its implementation plan for its NDC, as promised by President Bolsonaro at the Earth Day Summit. The mitigation agenda is very, very important. All countries play their part with their NDCs and with those implementation plans and long-term strategies. Our second objective is around adaptation and resilience. Climate change is happening, and those affected right now are some of the most vulnerable, some of the poorest communities and countries in the world. And that is only a portent of what is to come for all of us all over the world. So adapting to that reality, building resilience for the future, and providing help and assistance to those most affected is absolutely crucial. To take all of these things forward needs money, and that is our third core objective for COP26, finance. First, to encourage the developed world to make good its commitments on international climate finance the $100 billion a year target that was agreed over 10 years ago, which the world is now behind on and which is urgently needed. We also need to look to the future on future financial goals. But also we need to involve, crucially, the big financial institutions. So mobilizing, for example, the multilateral development banks, and also involving the private sector, getting business to look at its own portfolios, its assets, its products, its services, assessing climate risk and climate opportunity, and forging new partnerships with governments, with civil society. And our fourth objective is around the Paris Rulebook. That's the framework that agrees outcomes on Article 6 and other outstanding items from Paris, and that is also going to be key at Glasgow. And we look forward to working with Brazil on all these issues to facilitate an outcome that develop functioning mechanisms that help take forward action on climate change. And there are opportunities here, as well as the difficulties and the challenges, and particularly in the wake of this terrible, tragic pandemic that has affected us the world over. There are opportunities for a green transition, opportunities with new markets, with new generations of consumers that think differently, opportunities for investment in sustainable infrastructure, in a transition to more renewable forms of energy, and also opportunities in making the most of our natural world, protecting and conserving our forests, making the most of nature-based solutions, but also doing this in a way that is sustainable and doing this in a way that also, for example, helps land use, future agricultural productivity. And really what all of this is about is making a better world for everyone, protecting and preserving our world. And so we look forward to continuing to work with Brazil on this important agenda. We have also campaigns running called Race to Zero and Race to Resilience, involving partnerships with state governments, with regions, with cities, with universities, with youth groups, with Indigenous peoples, and others in civil society. So this is also a COP for all, because climate change is also for all. It is the reality of our generation. It is the challenge of our generation. And we need to take action now. And as the IPCC report tells us, time is running out. The actions we take in this next decade are critical to ensure that global temperature rise is within the 1.5 degree limit. Once we get past that point, that tipping point, we are on an ever more dangerous path. In this difficult year that we've all had, with all our meetings on Zoom, etc., we've done lots of analysis, we've done lots of talking to one another. But we need to move from analysis to greater ambition, but crucially, turn that ambition into action. And so I ask everyone on this conference to consider what action can be taken. What action can be taken at government level, at state level, in the private sector, in society, and what action can we take together to protect and preserve our planet, and most crucially, to act for people everywhere, to create better livelihoods and better lives. Thank you very much.
Obrigado, senhora Fiona Clauder, que é embaixadora da Conferência das Nações Unidas sobre Mudanças Climáticas de 2021, a COP26. Eu agradeço a sua participação e tenho certeza que a cada dia mais e mais brasileiros e brasileiras se convencem, se conscientizam e que nós estamos numa guinada que precisa ser dada com emergência, uma guinada verde para que nós possamos garantir a vida no planeta para as futuras gerações. Muito
This is
obrigado.
necessary to ensure life on the planet for the next generations. Now I invite Most Reverend Dom Valmor Oliveira de Azevedo, Archbishop in the city of Belo Horizonte and President of the National Conference of Bishops of Brazil. You have the floor. Health and peace to all here. With lots of respect, Senator Jacques Wagner, Chair of the Committee on the Environment of the Senate, thank you for the invitation and the honor to the National Conference of Bishops of Brazil on this opportunity to join the voice of the Church through the Conference of Bishops of Brazil to this choir that needs to grow and become harmonic in defense of the planet and life on the planet, and how we work for a new lifestyle, which is urgent, and we are aware of that, and we must contribute in the light of the values of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I thank you very much, and I salute you and all senators and all special guests for this important moment. On this opportunity, we continue to dream the work already carried out in the Senate. May we advance with the bill of law that will give us Green June to invest even more in this educational work to make the Brazilian society aware, which is very urgent. My word on behalf of the National Conference of Bishops of Brazil is to emphasize the non-IPCC report as a red alert to humanity. A study carried out by hundreds of scientists that dedicate their lives to analyze thousands of evidence collected around the planet alert us all to a scary reality. Each of the last 4 decades have become successively hotter than any other decade before since 1850. In 2018, IPCC report on global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Ms. Roberts, one of the directors of this report, said the decisions we make today are critical to ensure a safe world and sustainable for all now and in the future. The next few years will probably be more important in our history. We are now seeing unprecedented changes in climate and in biodiversity, and some of them are irreversible, regrettably. The message is clear: either we act now or the consequences will be more and more catastrophic. Scientific evidences show that global warming is faster than expected. It confirms that human activities are the main responsible for this. There is no doubt we are the cause. Our model of development, which, in the words of our dear Pope Francisco, exclude, degrades, and kills. The global population and all the creation suffer the consequences, but it is the poorer that suffer the most. Heat waves, droughts, and other extreme climate events take many lives, tending to increase in the next years, risking life and planet. In Brazil, we have a record cold in some regions and droughts that threaten energy provision and affect the poor the most. Slash and burn in the Amazon, which had diminished in 2012, has increased in 2020. Slash and burn in the Amazon, the Cerrado, and other Brazilian biomes create a chain of causes and effects with dynamics, with feedback loops, and expose forests to sun, which dries them and causes devastating fires that launch more GHG into the atmosphere, which makes things worse. These effects, the rains and the forests, and also evapotranspiration in the Amazon forest transports humidity, and also those responsible for the rains in the center west, southeastern, and south Brazil. Slash and burn in the Amazon gravely affects the water cycle in Brazil. Brazil lives today rain deficits that threaten our food security and water security, as well our energy system. According to our national system, reservoirs of hydroelectric plants in August operated with 22% of storage, and approximately responsible for 70% of the electric energy generation by hydroelectric. These reservoirs have their lowest levels of the last 91 years. Droughts and fires work together and potentialize reciprocally. Data from the satellite Landsat on fires recently analyzed and made available by InMetrobiomas are terrible. They show that 1.7 million square kilometers have burned at least once between 1985 and 2020. 1/5 of the Brazilian soil has been destroyed by fire. Only since 2000, almost 1.5 million square kilometers, 17.5% of the Brazilian territory has had a fire at least once. 78% of the area covered by vegetation, and 18% in protected areas by the legislation. The Amazon forest is under attack of fire. Into 2000 and 2019, the total of the area burned in the states were in the Amazon. In this period, 428 million square kilometers have been destroyed by fire in the Amazon. In droughts, in half of this area had fires more than once in the same place. Lots of the Amazonian species are threatened of extinction and impacted by fires. They are exterminating the Brazilian fauna, one of the richest in the world. We are in the process of exterminating them. In addition, the smoke of fires have particular material that cause respiratory diseases in children, the elderly, and people with chronic diseases. This year, we will have two global opportunities. The ONU Conference on Biodiversity in October and 26th United Nations Conference on the Climate, COP26. It is essential to say that Brazil is important to protect the biodiversity and also to address climate change. We need to commit urgently. In the light of the scientific evidence, I will bring some actions that I find important to contribute for the solutions. We need to combat slash and burn and protect the biodiversity. We need to implement a rigorous legislation to protect the environment and strengthen the institution that oversee the land. In Brazil, unfortunately, we live a process of flexibilization of the legislation on environmental protection, as well as a disruptor of the oversight system. Also, we need to protect the human rights of indigenous people who protect the biodiversity the most. They are constantly attacked by the ambition of agribusiness and mining. To aggravate the situation, the federal government has sent the National Congress a bill of law 191, 2020, which establishes the specific conditions for research and prospection of hydrocarbons and mineral resources, and also water for the generation of electricity in Indian land. It also institutes the indemnization for the use of Indian land. That means that mining and hydroelectrics and infrastructure necessary for entrepreneurs and businesses who are interested in taking Indian territories. It is necessary to end fossil fuels. Petrobras, our national company, needs to be converted into a company of renewable energies. In Brazil, because of its characteristics, has great potential for wind and photovoltaic energy. Lastly, we need to defend the rule of law. It is only possible to implement the necessary measures if we assure the functioning of institutions and popular sovereignty. As Pope Francis said in the Laudato Charter, climate change is a global problem with implications in the society, distributive, political, and societal, which is a big challenge to the humanity. Senators, guests, and others present, our unity in the combat to save the common cause, to save the planet, we need to unite. And the National Conference of Bishops of Brazil is on this fight and at your disposal, as Jesus was. If we do that, we can prevent a climate catastrophe. We count on all to address this huge challenge so as we can assure a common house habitable to everybody. Sorry for taking so long, and thank you very much. Thank you, Don Valmor. Actually, listening to you, it was a balm. It gave us a complete vision on behalf of CNBB on this issue. What you said, coming from those who preach the gospel and defend a full life on the planet, understanding this life as human rights, sustainability, social and environmental, economical sustainability is good for us. I hope that this preaching will not divide us. It's not an issue of ideologies, right or left, each one's faith. It's a matter of common sense. We humans need to understand that this is a time to change. We relate to the earth and the way we relate among ourselves. Brazil cannot carry on being an example of a social inequality at the social and regional level. In 2020, Brazil inserted 20 families into a privileged club of billionaires, and returned 2 million people to the club of extreme poverty. This is a report on our inequalities. This inequality is stupid. Yesterday, I was at another debate, and a young activist from the Amazon said, from the single central of workers, she used an expression that I'm going to use. She said, a stupid capital must understand that this way their lives will be short. When I talk about the preservation of the planet, as Governor Casagrande said, we are also thinking about economy and progress. If we continue, especially with the stance taken by the federal government, we will be isolated as a country and may be sanctioned internationally, including our bilateral trade. So I insist that the green agenda, which is a global agenda, and those of us and for us who have this blessing of having such biodiversity and the greatest, the largest tropical forest in the world, we have a gift from God and a responsibility to address these issues. So Don Valmor, I thank you very much for your words, which makes us all want to unite around this common goal. Now the word to Sir David King, chemist, former chief scientific advisor to the British government and chair of the Climate Repair Center at the University of Cambridge. Sir David King, you have the floor.
Today, and also what a critically important meeting this is for Brazil. What I'm going to tell you about is really an analysis that is underlined by the most recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change meeting. And at once let me acknowledge the importance of Brazilian scientists, and in particular Carlos Nobre, in establishing the IPCC way back in time. I'm currently working with another Brazilian, Mercedes Bustamante, and we have established a climate crisis advisory group, an international group of 14 people from 11 different countries. And of course, we had to have somebody from Brazil. Now, let me just start by saying that what is happening around the world today is that the ecosystems that we all depend on, the ecosystems that have evolved over many thousands of years, are now being radically disturbed by humanity to the point where our future is seriously at risk. And let me point to a few recent events. if we look at the extreme drought affecting many parts of South America in 2020, with estimated farming losses of $3 billion in Brazil alone, and further major losses in Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. The largest wildfires ever recorded before 2021, in 2020, burned in forests of North America and Southeast Australia, some with such fierce power that they were comparable to a moderate volcanic eruption. Australia broke heat records, including a temperature of 49 degrees centigrade in Sydney. And of course, we come to 2021 and we find that these were simply an introductory state of the world compared with 2021. I wonder if I could have my slide presentation. I will keep talking because I know we've got limited time. So let me say that the urgency for action is such that I believe what we plan to do, what we do over the next 5 years to 10 years, and by we I mean the whole of humanity, is going to determine the future of humanity for the next millennia. That's how critical it is now. We have been discussing climate change in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change since 1992, and basically we've made very, very little progress. Progress has been made, but nevertheless, we are simply watching our ecosystems being destroyed by our own actions. And so what we now have is a global state of emergency. I'm just going to talk you through some key points here. And my first key point corresponds to the rise in greenhouse gases, those gases that are causing the change in our climate. These are minority gases in our atmosphere, but these are the gases that absorb radiative heat from the surface of the Earth and keep us warmer. These are the gases that mean the more we put on, it's like adding another duvet on your bed at night. You will be warmer. You're keeping the heat in, and that's what we're doing by increasing greenhouse gases. Today, greenhouse gas levels are unconscionably high. The pre-industrial period, 275 parts per million. That's a comfortable world that we lived in for so many thousands of years. And we've now reached over 500 parts per million. Carbon dioxide levels have taken us to 415 parts per million. But the new big rise is methane emissions into the atmosphere. And methane emissions originate, of course, from coal, oil, and gas recovery. There's always escaping methane from those processes. But methane emissions also arise from farming practices. The big demand, the big new demand for meat products around the world, and in particular beef, means that more and more beef is being produced to meet that demand. And so global hunger for beef is one of the biggest factors in the rise of methane production into the atmosphere. We also know that farming for example, rice produces methane. And as the global middle-class population expands in numbers massively, a threefold increase nearly since the year 2000, we're seeing the demand for all these farming products increasing radically. We have to note the form of food that we eat because this is a radical change in our ecosystems as well. So if I move on from the level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere today to talk about what is happening in the Arctic Circle region. Now, I'm emphasizing the Arctic Circle region because what happens in the Arctic Circle will impact on the entire planet, and I will try to explain that. The reason the Arctic Circle is facing such a calamitous situation is quite simple. The Arctic, the North Pole, the Arctic Sea has always been covered with ice. This Arctic ice floating on the sea means that sunlight impinging on the North Pole region, particularly during the polar summer, is reflected back into space. And so the Arctic North Pole region is always very, very cold. On my Climate Crisis Advisory Group, one of our members is a member of the Sami group of people living up in the north of Finland. These are one of these indigenous peoples who takes an indigenous people's lead around the world. And I believe we have much to learn from indigenous people. And what he told me 6 months ago, the local temperature in his region was minus 30 degrees centigrade. And he said that's normal for this time of the year. But I spoke to him again in mid-August, and he said to me, the temperature today is unbelievable. We have never experienced it before, plus 32 degrees centigrade. In just a few months, the temperature around the North Pole region had increased by over 60 degrees centigrade. Now, what we are seeing there is that the Arctic Circle region, because of the exposure of the Arctic Ocean, the blue, deep blue Arctic Ocean to sunlight during the polar summer, the temperature rise has been unconscionably high. So the North Pole is, during the polar summer, that 3-month period, far from the coldest area in the Northern Hemisphere. It's one of the warmest areas. And the net result of that is a massive distortion in one of the parameters that we have considered to be at a tipping point or close to a tipping point. So this is simply, and thank you for the slide, showing you the rise in the temperature in the Arctic Circle region in red compared with the average for the planet. So the planet is now 1.25 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial level. What hope do we have of staying below 1.5 now? But look at what's happening in the Arctic Circle region. It's now over 3 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial level. That is what is causing all of these crises. If I could have the next slide. Next slide, please. So this is the loss in Arctic sea ice volume. And you'll see the loss in the volume since 1980 of ice is dramatic. The next slide. Excuse the graphs, those of you who are not used to them, but let me move on to something more pictorial. So what we see is, yes, I can have the next slide, please, is that we are into a tipping point cascading. So let me take you to the next slide. And one of the major points about this is that if we look at the consequences of Arctic warming, really there are 3 dramatic consequences that impact on all of us. The first is that Greenland is now sitting during the Arctic polar summer in a blue sea. And Greenland is also subject to the fires burning, and the ice is no longer beautifully white, it's going black, and that means it absorbs sunlight. The next slide. And so as a result of of Greenland exposed to this blue sea, exposed to the very warm air above it, and also absorbing more sunlight itself, the Greenland ice, it's losing ice more and more rapidly year on year. Today, sea level rises are due something like 70% due to expanding seas because of rising temperatures, but 24% is now due to the loss of ice from land. And that's a number that is increasing rapidly year on year. We're going to see extreme sea level rises into the future. Next slide, please. And so what I really want to focus on is the second effect. First, sea level rise. Secondly, we are seeing a massive distortion of what we call the wind blowing around the Arctic Circle region, which keeps the cold air in and the warm air out, that is now massively distorted. And the result is that the jet stream, it's so called, is now causing havoc in the Northern Hemisphere. Now, I think we've gone a little bit out of order, so let me just pause before I come to that one. What I want to show you is a third effect. The North Pole region is a region where carbon is stored very, very effectively and has been for hundreds of thousands and millions of years. But we are now beginning to see the Arctic region destabilizing. So the jet stream up in the Arctic region, the top block up here, is now destabilized. And the net result is that we are beginning to see release of methane and the explosive release of methane in that region. Now, I want to tell you that the distortion of the jet stream is right behind what has happened, for example, in North America during this polar summer, just over the last 3-4 months. You will know that Lytton in Canada, on the western coast of the North America, Lytton experienced a temperature of plus 49 degrees centigrade. Now that's the highest ever recorded in Canada. And of course, the people of Lytton do not have, on the whole, air conditioning. And the result of that is that many people died because really with a temperature of 49 degrees centigrade, no access to air conditioning, 3 or 4 days is as long as a human being can live. Now I'm going to ask to just hold this particular slide. So there's Lytton in British Columbia in Canada, on the left-hand side in red, that temperature of nearly 50 degrees centigrade. And that hot region is coming about because we're seeing where it's labeled stormy, cold air being pushed down from the North Pole, cold air being pushed down by the warm air around the North Pole and causing this distortion of the jet stream. But the hot air comes up from the equatorial region, causing this massive temperature rise in Western North America. And the next slide, if we have that, should show us that there's an alternative locking in process which happened over New York. And this was a locking in of that jet stream, causing the devastation in New York this summer. So we've seen extreme heat and rain in the United States, and it's really related directly to what I'm saying has happened in the Arctic Circle region. Now, I want to move on from this just to discuss what we can anticipate going forward in time. We could try and slide on. Yeah, I think you've got a different presentation from the one I sent. So let's just hold the slides for the moment. What I want to say is that rising sea levels impacts different parts of the world differently. And the biggest impact of rising sea levels is likely to be in Southeast Asia. What I was hoping to show was a predicted map of Vietnam for 2050, just less than 30 years from now. Vietnam will be under seawater, 90% of the country under seawater at least once a year by 2050. Now, Vietnam has a large population. Vietnam is one of the world's biggest producers of rice. This will no longer be possible after the first inundation of this very low-lying country, Vietnam. We will see no longer rice production from that area. Right across the water from Vietnam is Indonesia. Indonesia too, this archipelago, island nation, is going underwater. The capital, Jakarta, will no longer be livable by mid-century, and the government of Indonesia is now planning its capital on higher land. But the land mass for the peoples of these regions is going to be reduced very significantly. And let me emphasize, I'm talking about just 30 years from now. Now, imagine rice production from Southeast Asia and from the nearby lying coast of China being massively reduced. That is going to cause havoc in global food prices. But imagine the second consequence. The level of people who will be seeking somewhere else to live will be in excess of 100 million by mid-century, unless something is managed to manage this problem. So if I just move on, I want to say, of course, we must act now. What must we do? I believe we need a comprehensive strategy. At the moment, we don't have a comprehensive strategy. We're simply saying, and quite right, we need deep and rapid emissions reduction. Every country has got to get itself off fossil fuels and get onto renewable energy sources and all of the alternatives, electric cars and so on. What we also need, however, in addition to reduction of emissions, we are damaging the planet with emissions. Of course, we must reduce that. But we also need to remove excess greenhouse gases that are already creating these problems. We know from the latest IPCC report that sea level rise will continue as a result of what I've just described into the coming centuries. So even though we might say, well, we might put up with 0.5 meter, 1 meter, even 2 meters sea level rise, although I don't believe we can, we are having to anticipate 20 meters sea level rise if we extrapolate out to the coming hundreds of years. There is no future for humanity in that sort of picture. So we need to remove excess greenhouse gases we've already put into the atmosphere. And then thirdly, we need to buy time, because it's going to take us to the end of the century to correct the damaging situation we've already created. And we will have to learn how to refreeze the North Pole, refreeze the Arctic Sea during the Arctic polar summer. During the winter, a layer of ice forms over the Arctic Sea, a very thin layer of ice, but then it's quickly lost during the polar summer. How do we retain, and this is what the team I've built up here in Cambridge is working with internationally, how do we retain that layer of ice and keep building it year on year so that we reflect the sunlight away from the sea? We need to buy time by restoring those parts of the climate system where the tipping point has been passed. I think I have come to the end of what I wanted to say, and thank you very much for listening. And let me say, the visits I made to Brazil in the past, in the run-up to Paris in 2015, I made many trips to Brazil. I brought many British scientists to work in the Amazon under Brazilian guidance, and many of those scientists are still working there. We would love to continue to help Brazil to manage one of the world's most critical ecosystems, the forests of South America. Thank you.
Obrigado, Sir David King.
Thank you, Sir David King. Very elucidating and scary, your presentation.
E realmente, eu acho que são evidências científicas que não comportam.
These are scientific evidence that bear no ideological debates or unfundamented debates without the science and knowledge. As you said, our mission is urgently to change human attitude on Earth. Last, as you said, and we have several land areas disappearing due to the rise of sea level. The sanitary crisis we live today results from the environmental crisis, the environmental unbalance we have been producing. The diseases we have seen are rooted in a disruption of the environment. Thank you so much. I hope to continue counting on your cooperation for our reflections in Brazil. I will now pass the floor to Ms. Greta Thunberg, environmental activist.
Hi, thank you for having me today. My name is Greta Thunberg, and I am a climate and environmental activist from Sweden. And to be honest, I am really in no position to tell you what to do. I come from a part of the world that initiated the climate and ecological emergency, the crisis which is the reason why we are here today. This is a part of the world that is much more historically responsible for this emergency than you are. A part of the world that has signed up to lead the way. And I come from a country which to a large extent has inspired forestry models all over the world with its lack of prioritizing nature and indigenous rights, based on the idea that nature is something that we can and should domesticate and conquer for the benefit of the few. But no matter how you see it, the things Brazil's leaders are doing now are completely shameful, especially in the light of the way it's treating and has been treating the indigenous peoples and nature. Brazil sure did not start this crisis, but your leaders are adding a lot of the fuel to the fire. And just because the leaders of the global north have failed, and yes, failing they are, that is no excuse for Brazil not to take a different path. The Amazon, the lungs of the earth, is now close to a tipping point. And several studies suggest that parts of it are now emitting more carbon than it is absorbing because of human-initiated forest fires and legal as well as illegal logging. And this is happening on your watch. Indeed, it is being directly fueled by your government. But the world cannot afford to lose the Amazon, because if we lose the Amazon, we will most likely lose all possibilities of reaching the Paris Agreement. And that will be a death sentence to countless people in countless parts of the world, not the least in Brazil. You have a historic responsibility, but also an unprecedented opportunity to lead the way. But in order to do so, you must unite behind the science and give stewardship of the land back to indigenous peoples of the Amazon. Globally, indigenous people make up less than 5% of the population, but they are protecting 80% of the biodiversity. They are the guardians of the land, and indigenous rights and climate justice go hand in hand. It is time to come to terms with our history and for colonialism to end. And conservation cannot be entrusted only to governments, companies, or Western NGOs, but to those who have been taking care of the land for millennia. But right now, as we speak, indigenous people all over the world are being threatened and even killed for protecting the land, and very much so in Brazil, again on your watch. And this is outrageous. The recent proposed bills in Brazil are yet another death sentence to indigenous rights, to biodiversity, and to future living conditions on planet Earth, as it would rapidly speed up the already disastrous conditions in and of the Amazon rainforest. And again, I am in no position to tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. People all around the world are watching you right now. And will you take action to help prevent the worst impacts of the climate and ecological crisis? Will you support the indigenous peoples who live in the Amazon to care for the lungs of the earth? And will you be on the right side of history? I am just one person, but the eyes of all the world are upon you. It is time for people like me to pass the mic to the most affected people in the most affected areas. Thank you.
Senhora Greta Thunberg.
Greta Thunberg. It's very important what you said. Things have not started down here, obviously, but this is not a justification for some to look at others' mistake to justify new mistakes and deepen a crisis that will be damaging to all of us. Thank you for your participation. I will now pass the floor on to Ms. Samela Saturemawe, environmental activist, biology student, presenter, and consultant.
Bom dia, eu sou a Samela Saturemawe.
Good morning. I am Santila Saturemawe. I'm a young communicator for the articulation of Indian people of Brazil, young communicator for the women Indians, part of coordination of the Brazilian Indian Amazon. I'm also a student, a biology student, and we are here in Brazilian in the 2nd March of Indian women. Women reforesting mines for the healing of Earth. We Indians are the main defenders of the nature. We cannot think of a living Amazon sustainable standing without considering the Indian peoples. We are here as biomes. We are the Amazon. We are the Caatinga, the Pantanal. We are the Amazon. We Indian women, we will heal the earth. We young Indians are the main actors for changing climate change. We Indians must be here fighting for the environment and for the territory. In a situation that people do not take into account, there are many genocide bills of law in the Brazilian Congress that will threaten our territory, that will threaten our lives. These are bills of law that will open space for mining, for logging, for miners in our territory. We will not put up with that. We as Indians are the main defenders of the environment, and we are here in Brazil mobilized because we will not accept miners in our territory, loggers will not. We are here in Brazil with over 4,000 women, 6,000 Indians in all. We left our territory to fight because all that happens in Indian lands will also happen in your own land, in your own states, where you all live. People only care about climate change with the environment when that affects them directly. We Indian peoples hold the sky so that it doesn't come down on our heads, but not only on our heads, but we think about the collective, we think about everybody. We hold the sky so that it doesn't come down on everybody's heads. The most preserved territories in Brazil are Indian territories. Brazil was 100% Indian land, and we are now down to 13%. And consequently, these 13% of the most preserved land in Brazil. It is important to further preserve and protect Indian land. Take into consideration the Indian peoples as main defenders of the environment. And we young Indians protagonize the preservation of the environment, not only as Indians taking into consideration our traditional knowledge, but also we are at the universities studying, learning. I study biology at the University of the Amazon. I belong to the Saturemawe people. We Indians are the main defenders of the nature. We cannot think about the Amazon preservation environment without considering the Indian peoples. We Indian women will heal the earth.
Você concluiu?
Are you complete? Thank you, Samela, for your participation. We are many here in the Federal Senate, and we agree with your speech, with your words. We must make an effort. The idea of the session is bring awareness. We do not want to attack, but bring awareness so that we are a majority in favor of what urgent and necessary to do to preserve for preservation, and the Indian peoples with their traditional knowledge and their presence are effectively great holders, great executors of protection to our Amazon forest. So I thank you for your participation and I wish you success. I see you are in the protest, in the march, Women's March. And I salute you all who are participating in this moment of citizenship. We have now finished the speeches of our guests, and I want to invite our senators enrolled, Senator Espiridion Amin, Liziane Gama, and Senator Zenaide Maya. I will pass the floor on to Senator Espiridion Amin for his speech. President, can you hear me? I lost my screen. Can you please pass the floor to Senator Zenaide and I will speak after her. I will pass the floor on now to Senator Liziane Gama. Your Excellency, are you ready to speak? No, I will send the floor on to Senator Zenaide Maya. And I salute Senator Alcir Lucas, who has just arrived. Senator Zenaide Maya has the floor. Mr. President Jacques Wagner, Senator Espiridion Amin, Liziane Gama, and other colleagues. Congratulations to you all for this session, this hearing, to talk about IPCC and congratulate and thank our guests, Governor Casagrande, Fiona Clowder, John Valmore Oliveira, David King, Greta Thunberg, and this young Indian woman, Samela Satere. It is very important, Senator Wagner, and all of you, to give visibility to the population and show that degradation, exploration, and exclusion, as has been pointed out by CNBB President, this takes to death, this extractivism, mining, and addition of degrading the nature and exclude the indigenous peoples and kill. It is cruel because extractivism in Brazil, extractivism is extraction of natural resources, be they vegetable, mineral, or animal. Extractivism in Brazil was one of the sectors that increased GOP, that most profited in Brazil. In addition to degrading the environment, this degradation is not only due to extractivism and slash and burn. In 2 years and 8 months, Brazil approved 1,140 new agrotoxic products, which is degrading. It's pulverized and goes into rivers, fish, and the original population suffers the most. What happens in our country? The nature is explored, exports, and Brazil exports with the exemption of several taxes, and nothing is left for our people, because these taxes could be distributed into health, education for the human population or animal population. Usually it's one family responsible for exporting. They buy machines abroad, so they can carry out extractivism in Brazil. They do not generate jobs here. They invest in two things that Brazil must know. They buy bonds, financial bonds, gaining interests, and send these profits abroad. The issue of environmental degradation, we can see. I have nothing against grain production, but how to explain to the Brazilian people if Brazil is one of the greatest producers of food and exporters of food in the world? So I wanted to show that not only degradation, exclusion of indigenous people, slash and burn, a lack of respect to life, but there is nothing left for the Brazilian people. The indigenous people are right when they talk about this. We have laws that we need to review that takes water and riches from our nature. Mining have incredible profits, and this brings social inequality in the country. As Senator Wagner said, we are not talking about parties, we're talking about the defense of life. Defense of life of those who live today and our descendants, and the respect to the indigenous peoples who were already here when the whites arrived. So if not from the political side, I would say it is political, because these attitudes of not charging taxes of what is extracted from the nature, from our people who do the hard work, and not to tax the people and do not tax the rich, these people who are making this extraction, is unfair. So I want to congratulate Senator Jack Wagner for this opportunity that we have to defend lives, and the defense of life is political. And we have heard that inequality will continue, and the disrespect to indigenous lands, and the world must be aware of that. To close, I have learned that Brazil has the most preserved forests. Yes, and it is a privilege. Other countries took very long to find out about the damage caused to nature that leads to global heating and the loss of so many lives. And we had the privilege of finding out that we had the diagnosis, and we know what the treatment is. So we need to perform our role, just as these two youngsters said today, Samela and Greta Thunberg. So the population needs to know that the riches are being explored and nothing is left for the poor. Thank you, Mr. President, and all guests. Thank you, Senator Zenaide Maya, for your participation. Before passing the floor on to the next speaker, I salute Senator Fabiano Comparato, who joined us. Senator Espiridião Amin, let me welcome Deputy Angela Amin, who is at your side. Senator Espiridião Amin, you have the floor. Thank you, Senator. Congratulations, Senadora Zenaide, for your words. but especially for the present of the nuts, the gift of the nuts. She's thanking Senator Zenaide Maia for the cashew nuts that she gifted us with, for the one who's in charge here, which is my wife. So Senator Wagner, I want to congratulate you for this event and the plurality of presence here. I was impressed with all the speeches, especially those that come from our experience. Senator Casagrande, Governor Casagrande. I'm going to divide my presentation in two parts. The first will be addressed to you as chair of this committee on the environment. In 2010, I divided my PhD thesis at the Federal University of Santa Catarina. The title of my dissertation was Public Management by Sustainability Indicators and Use of TICs in a urban observatory. This was November 2010. Maybe it was my most daring attempt to insert the environment not as a piece of the thing, but as the center of public management. I had worked on indicators on social and I had worked on social indicators, economic indicators, but the issue of sustainability of until when will the world put up with us? Now, as Mr. Valmore said, put up with each other. We have to put up with one another and support each other. Until when are we going to put up with each other and put up with us and bring that to the center? To streamline that, it would be worth to talk about an academic paper that updated this. So maybe in November, we could bring a Brazilian contribution. It's not your environment. It's not this lateral concern. This has to be the rule of the game. To put up with ourselves and support ourselves should be the rule of the game. And together with this, with what Senator Zenaide said, and first world countries, I am the first one from the first generation. My father and my mother were not born in Brazil. Both my parents emigrated to Brazil because they were in a worse off where they came from. So this relation of exchanging commodities is a debauchery against us. Since 1500, when Brazil was discovered, or maybe before that, we see the world as a source of commodities. Since the Brazil wood, since iron ore, rare land, the world sees us, Senator Zenaide, as a path where they can come for whatever they want. This is the way the world has treated us and is treating us now when they want to buy Brazilian lands. It's because their land is not competitive enough. They want to take out from us. If there's someone who gives us lessons on debauchery regarding sustainability, it's the set of the countries of the world. Our greatest partners want to come here to take a ship out of iron ore and pay with 1/3 of containers of semiconductors and chips, which we actually don't have to our car industry, which has stopped because of the lack of these semiconductors. So this exchange must also come to the debate. We can also talk, considering the clarity of Senator Jacques Wagner, we could talk about the environment, streamline the environment in the public management. I attempted that in 2010. Public management with a focus on sustainability indicators, from fishing to the concept of national happiness. And the Getúlio Vargas Foundation researches this, that ask the world to reflect on the management model that takes into consideration our Pope encyclic, so that we can correct this ethical deformation in the world. This ethical deformation, we have watched how many, lots of vaccines are more than 250 million doses of vaccines in Great Britain are in excess, and also in the United States and in Africa. Are there any vaccines in Africa? Oh, they don't have the technology. They have no IFA. This is a debauchery to hear advice from people who are acting now, making fun of the poor without technology, who are not even able to have an IFA to produce. We will be able to produce it soon. We are in the midst of a pandemic, and the treatment given by the rich, and many here represented who came here to teach us, it is a debauchery of the poor and the greatest show of egoism shows when we need it the most. We are all vulnerable. We have seen first that which belongs to me. When vaccines are left, then I'll think about you. This is also stupid, because with the trade we have today, and there is a ship, when a ship arrives in New York, probably the crew of that ship is from countries where the vaccine has not yet arrived, and they may export the virus. So all of us have to learn, but we will not learn with cynicism. So my original proposal to Senator Wagner is to write a paper to bring to the November conference, saying the following: the environment, sustainability has to be the center of our vision and our actions in terms of public management. Thank you all. Senator Amin, I am happy to hear you. It's always good to hear you. And I hear you, and I hear other colleagues, I feel more and more convinced that a lack of bias is essential so we can evolve, regardless of different stances. When we talk with people who have principles and character and who are not pretending and thinking what they, and speaking what they think, it is always a productive dialogue that will take us ahead. I am very happy. I did not know. My first request is that you please send me your PhD dissertation And next week, I hope we can talk and work on this idea. Your Excellency talked about something fundamental. It's not a matter of attacking, but not being servile. What you said is very important. Don't come and teach me if you yourself is acting this way. So when you talk about sovereignty, it's not sovereignty against someone, but we talk about in defense of our interests. And we have our assets. For example, this issue of selling land to foreigners. As a governor of Bahia, I saw this many times, and I asked them, what do you want? You want to take the land, the sun, and the water, what will be left to us? So we need to value what we have. And what you said is very important. We may come to COP with a proposal that will also demand certain attitudes from other countries. I was criticized for this event. You are inviting foreigners to criticize us, and I said no. We are also going to share and say what matters to us. So I thank you, and we need to talk about preparing a paper. It's very important we do that, because this consortium of governors, which is an innovating, we have.
Poder tentar melhorar. Eu queria só comentar que a senadora Elisiane Gama, que está inscrita ainda, mas ela está tentando fazer a sua conexão e está com dificuldade, se conseguir até o final dessa sessão, também falar a sua fala para nós todos. E eu convido agora meu querido amigo, senador Fabiano Contarato. Vossa Excelência está linkado? Perdeu? Bom, enquanto os dois não conseguem se linkar...
Well, while we wait, who is there? Senator Elisiane?
Você está de lado aí, mas tudo bem.
Presidente, deixa eu ver se eu melhoro aqui a imagem rapidinho.
Let me try to improve this. You may just turn your camera around.
Está se equilibrando assim de lado, mas tudo bem. Agora.
Deixa eu ver. Melhorou
Pronto.
assim?
Wow, it's better. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to congratulate you and also to greet all the participants. And I think it's very important to have all the participants from abroad, like Ms. Greta Thunberg, who inspires the whole world, and also to my daughters and all the youth. And for these people, it's like hope for better future, for better days, and she promotes, like she reproduces this enthusiasm through the young people. And you, Mr. Chairman, have conducted this meeting in a very professional way, in a very serious way, in the sense to promote more effective measures and firm measures in defense of the environment all over the world. And in our country, unfortunately, we have witnesses some news that are not very hopeful. It's an impact to our hope, but this is an stimulus to keep going on ahead. And we are on the verge of COP 2016, and we need to prepare some protocols from Brazil to reclaim this position in defense of the environment. We are here in the, we have moved backwards, but we have to assume the leading role in the environmental issues due to the assets that we have, environmental assets that we have in Brazil. Unfortunately, we have part ways with this, all this international support that we used to receive to protect our biomes and our forests. And I'm here just to congratulate you and congratulate all the lecturers and those public hearings sessions are important to discuss, important to make us realize that we need to pursue our goals and our dreams. I congratulate you. I congratulate everybody that took part of this great session. Thanks, Senator Elisiani. You have a great responsibility to arrange, to prepare the report on the deforestation under the Commission of the Environment. I'd like to ask whether Senator have connected. If not, I just like to add another comment. I'm very happy to see the participation of the citizens to this session. Several citizens have participated and have sent questions to through our portal website, and this is important to have the public opinion coming from the youth, the Brazilian youth, regarding the environmental issues, and that is very important. I'd like just to read out 3 or 4 examples mentioning the authors. Rosaldo Jr. from the Federal Districts. The IPCC points out that to reduce the level of the human impact to zero, what kind of measures does Brazil have to implement?
Santos, do Distrito Federal.
And Elisia Santos from the Federal Districts. The IPCC said that the temperature will increase until the mid-century. Is there any form that we can improve these prognosis? We need some incentives to replace our fleet with renewable sources vehicles. And we need incentives to use new technologies that allow the use of new technologies, issuing less greenhouse gas effects. And I take I assume here I undertake to answer everyone that has answered these questions and sent these comments. And I'd like to return to our panelists for their final remarks, and like to return the. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank everybody that has brought their contribution to this meeting. I'd like to thank all the senators for receiving me, for having me here. I'd like just to emphasize a few and bring some notes regarding these questions presented by the participants. The best case scenario is that we have 1.6 Celsius degree by mid-century. If we are able, when we manage to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases, not only carbon, but the other gases as well, we will have, otherwise we will have a worsening of the scenario regarding the climate events, whether flooding or droughts. it will be increasing in the future. The second thing that I'd like to emphasize here is the importance of Brazil in Scotland. The chairman, Jacques Wagner, highlighted the importance of Brazil so that we can fulfill our commitments regarding emissions, and also in terms of the commitments we have entered in Paris that we need to readdress, reconfirm. Actually, we would have to already present results, but to defend the Brazilian position in the international scenario. That's the position of Brazil, and by Brazil I mean the federal government, the Congress, the civil society, and the entrepreneurs, the business people, so that we have a reasonable position to sustain our position in the country.
Obrigado, querido governador Casagrande. Mais uma vez, parabenizo Vossa Excelência pela iniciativa da coalizão de governadores que vocês batizaram como consórcio.
Consórcio Brasil Verde.
O Consórcio Brasil Verde, que realmente creio que é uma iniciativa alvissareira, uma inovação, juntarmos governadores independentes de partido político. E eu acho que esses arranjos institucionais são novidades importantes no cenário nacional. Eu quero... Bom, o senhor David King não está mais conectado conosco, e eu pergunto se a senhora Greta Thunberg...
I'd like to ask whether Ms. Greta Thunberg would like to bring her final remarks.
Not really, just as has been emphasized many times here before, that we are now at a very, very crucial time in which every decision matters, and every decision will help shape the future, either in a positive way or in a negative way. And it is up to us to choose if we want to move in a more positive way or in a more negative way. And that choice is to a large extent up to you. So I and countless of other activists around the world, we expect you to choose wisely. And we expect you to choose wisely, and we hope that you will.
Obrigado, senhora Greta Thunberg, pela sua participação e pela toda a sua militância.
Thank you for your participation, Greta Thunberg, and for your militancy.
Estimula muito a nossa juventude também a essa militância.
Your environmental militancy inspires our youth. Samela Satere Maue,
Fazer suas considerações finais.
would you like to make your final considerations? I will give you the floor now. We, the indigenous people, think about a future when our territory and lives are constantly threatened, and we do not need to leave our territory, and that we have assured rights, a future in which our indigenous people will not have to worry about our land being invaded by miners, by logging and other illegal activities, and that we may have healthy food without our rivers being contaminated by mercuries, that the Iroquois people may not be assassinated because of mining, the Yanomami people may not be assassinated because of mining, and the Lokwanonshoko people may not be assassinated due to mining. We are more than 305 peoples, and we speak more than 274 languages, and we need respect to our identity and our specificities and our assured right, which is in the Constitution. We want a future in which the nature, we belong to the nature, and that we will not need to be always struggling and fighting against the government and people who want to take our territory. We want to say no to PL 490, demarcation now, indigenous lives matter. Thank you, Samela. Congratulations for your participation and your militancy. On behalf of the indigenous people, I want to say that it's very stimulating to see our youth, Blacks, indigenous, to become aware of such a fundamental issue, which is the environmental issue and the preservation of our planet and the respect to the identity. That's why we are intolerant to any biases, any preconceived ideas. Senator Spiridão Amin, would you like to make any final comments? Senator Zenaide Maia, would you like to make your final remarks?
Bom, então eu quero apenas... Oi.
Já fui? Foi, porque ele está encerrando, aí deu a...
Está arrumado o cabelo, senadora.
Your hair looks good, Senator.
Senadora, pois não, senadora, com Vossa Excelência a palavra.
Senator, you have the floor.
As suas considerações finais. Seu microfone.
For your closing remarks. Mr. President, thank you very much. And I want to emphasize the importance of this session because we give visibility to the population to a matter that I think is distant from them, but it's very close to each one of us. So thank you to all participants. It was fundamentally important. Information is power. And Senator Jacques Wagner, and that's what you and all of us are doing here, empowering our people with knowledge so we can defend the environment. And if we do not continue hurting the environment, there will be no future. I am grateful that many of the world leaders have woken up for that, and God willing, we will also take a different look towards any form of life. Thank you, Senator Zenaide. Before closing the session, I want to thank once again all guests who participated in this thematic session, which would normally be in the Senate plenary, but because of the pandemic and other issues, we had to bring it to the Committee on the Environment. I want to thank you, my team, the team, all the staff who helped, and I want to reaffirm, I want to clarify what the motivation, what motivated this session. I believe Governor Casagrande, some demands have been consolidated. It's not an opinion, it's a conclusion. This is the sixth IPCC report created in 1988. The first one that called international attention was the fourth report in 2007 that already indicated this march of the way humans relate to the earth and how we relate amidst each other with the discrepancies within our country. Our country has many social discrepancies, which is an absurdity in my opinion. the extremes of opulence and extreme poverty. This work, I want to further clarify, because I do not want to go into an ideological war. And we are talking about scientific studies, over 200 scientists, including from Brazil. 25 or 30 Brazilian scientists who participated, and I want to salute them and salute Professor Mercedes Bustamante, who contributes with us in the Forum of Ecologic Regeneration. I see some of my colleagues trying to deny what the science says. It is impossible that today someone will doubt that the sun is the center of our solar system, that the earth is round, because we see the earth through our astronauts. So there's no questioning. As has been said by Sir David King, we are going forward. We are diminishing the land space because of irresponsibilities we have been committing. Now the signs of danger are on. I am not going to, I will avoid the finger pointing because I don't want culprits. I want solutions. I'm not going to finger point the federal government, which I deplore, but I'm not going to focus on that. So those with responsibility at the municipal, state level, and national legislatives, that businesses, foundations, and other institutions of civil society, that we unite so we can urgently take a stance. Now, talking about entrepreneurs and businesses, trade, services, agriculture, agribusiness. You all know of the importance of each of these sectors, but we also know of the greater importance of preserving the environment and our greater house, which is the earth. So we do not want contradictions, but we do want to debate honestly and confront ideas, which is the soul of democracy and the only possible path. So that we do not live false dichotomies that some introduce into the national and international debate. Those who do not have arguments need a cliche. And that's all they have to say. Now we want to deepen the debates for those who are brave enough to share their ideas. We are open, Governor Casagrande and other colleagues. I believe that our thematic debate session filled its role to clarify and bring data and to bring convergence so we can overcome difficulties. I believe that all speeches can contribute to our Committee on the Environment, which I consider as a central committee for our country. Now we are coming to a close, and I hereby declare the session closed, and I thank all of you who stayed with us. Have a great weekend and a great rest of your day.